Thank you. Well, welcome to the October 9th, 2018 Facilities Committee meeting of the Radnor Township School District. We will start with introductions and administrative remarks from the administrators. Anyone? Okay, moving on to public comment. Is there any public comment? Going once? Hello, Mrs. Sherry.
Judy Sherry, Governor's Circle, Newtown Square. The online question in August, I guess, whenever it was posted, stated, can the district put 3-point seat belts for school buses on a meeting agenda and discuss the topic in public? Instead of answering that question, the following was posted. Quote, most organizations dedicated to student transportation oppose mandatory seat belts, including the National Association for Pupil Transportation, the National School Transportation Association, and the National Association of State Directors of Pupil Transportation Services. That was the response to my question. So now I have some additional questions. Do any of the organizations listed by the administration, I guess it was the administration, there's no one attributed to that response, do any of the organizations listed actually oppose seatbelts, or do they just oppose making them mandatory? And which national organizations are in favor of installing seatbelts on school buses? And again, I'll ask the question that was never answered. Will the district and school board put 3-point seat belts for school buses on a meeting agenda and discuss the topic in public? The second issue is regarding the current state of stormwater management on district properties. And I asked this question also in finance. The response to the stormwater system located, I asked the question about whether the district was satisfied. The response was the stormwater system located between the administration building and Radnor Middle School is working properly for the water needs of the RMS bus loop, the RMS West Side, and the administration building. And they also responded, at this time, the district is satisfied with the stormwater management for the administration building and RMS. So my new questions were, was there water infiltration from flooding in any of the district's buildings? If so, which buildings were infiltrated, and what is the estimated damage structurally and financially? Was there any other property damage from the flooding? If so, what's the estimated cost for this property, and what's the estimated total cost to the district? And I also mentioned the fact that the township is compiling, I think, a list of this so that it can apply for funding. So I think it would be important to report this to the township. Then when I asked, really, my question is, what is the opinion of board members on having a joint meeting with the township on issues like tri-party? And I'm just wondering, does the school board answer any of these questions, or do they just completely delegate all of this responsibility to the administration? Maybe that's the question I need to ask. Are they involved in answering any of these questions? I think it would be a good idea to list, as you do right now, in terms of who asked the questions, who is responding to the questions so someone can be held accountable. Finally, in August, I guess, I asked, what were the recommendations proposed by Radnor Township School District to improve the traffic impact at the Penn property, and how can the public obtain the minutes from the meeting of the Township District and Penn? The response was, refer to January 30th, 2018 Facilities Committee meeting of the whole board minutes. So when I reviewed the minutes, they only included Dave Falcone's recommendation for traffic. Who was Dave Falcone actually representing at that time? Was he representing Penn? Was he representing the school board? What specifically did the district suggest to improve the traffic impact? That was my question of the Penn development on its properties, including the high school and bus depot. So also, because I had to go back to January to get the response from the district to my question, it popped out that in that summary, there was a statement that said, there is a belief that the township is interested in making this Penn Medicine sidewalk the Radnor Trail and not use the school district for the trail. What a great selling point. So we didn't have to put the trail on the school district side, we put it on the Penn Medicine side. So I thought, wow, why didn't we do that? And then I looked, the facilities minutes from April state that the change in location of the trail will not pass the safety review. Specifically, I'd like to know, please state why the Radnor Trail has now shifted back from the Penn property to the school district's property, and why don't you, as a board members, fight to put the trail on the Penn side and reduce the impact on the school district side? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sherry. Anyone else? So, Ms. Spurtle?
Hello, Cindy Spurtle, Wayne. To continue with the trail on the Radnor Trail extension on school district, I did watch the video per the answer to the question that was addressed. I watched the January 30th, 2018 video of the meeting, of the presentation about the trail. And it was a shock and surprise to the president of the board that it wasn't even planned, that Penn was offering to put the trail on their side, open up to the public, and they weren't even thinking that the school district property would be used. So again, I will ask the question, why not leave it as Penn is offering to have the trail? Plus, we won't have the problem, the school district will not have a problem of cutting down all the trees that have been a concern in the past. So the question is, where does it, one of the questions that was answered from a facilities meeting was the timeline for the Simone Collins of the Radnor Trail to be shared with the public, and the answer was yes, it will be. Well, when is that going to be, and do we even need that study? It's something to be considered if Penn has offered to put the trail, and it appears that in the explanation in the meeting that I watched, the trail is not connected to other parts of the trail. It's just considered a section of the Radnor Trail, which apparently is being done at different parts of the township. It's not connecting everything together. And that would also answer the question that was asked in September about the Shade Tree Commission, whether they have approved the removal of the trail. The answer that was given is something that really bothers me. As a member of the public, you would think that the school district and the township are working together. The answer to that question was the district would not be able to answer this question as we are not creating and preparing the potential Radnor Trail. Well, at this point, it looks like no one really knows what's happening with the trail and the school district, and I think that's something that should be that's pending, especially with the construction now underway at Penn Radnor. The question was raised and by the as to when, how much was the flooding damage, what the total cost was, and as of the September meeting, that number was not available. Is there an estimate, or do we have any idea of a truck? The damage and loss of a few vehicles was mentioned, but nothing more than that. And they also had one more on policy. And nope, it's more on policy. I'll wait for policy committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? No? Oops. Okay, moving right along to our agenda item. Our approval of the minutes, I guess. Is everybody good with the minutes? Yes. Everyone good? Okay, so moving right along to the Radnor High School Bleacher Project.
Danielle Schrader, or Danielle Hoffer is here. She is with Schrader Group. She goes by the nickname Danny. Some of you may be familiar with her. She previously worked with Gilbert Architects, who did quite a few projects for us here, and she most recently worked on the project, the high school enrollment study,
Capacity.
the capacity study. So Danny, welcome. And we're going to give you an overview of where we're at currently with the Bleacher project.
So she's going to be my clicker, so I'm going to nod to her to advance the slides. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now? Thank you for having me today. Again, my name is Danielle Hoffer with the Schrader Group. Tonight, we'd like to just give you an overview of the process that we'll be doing for the master plan. We just had our kickoff meeting yesterday, so I don't have any answers yet, and this process, I think, is very prudent in terms of how to facilitate the data collection as well as getting information from the key stakeholders in the planning process. So, next. So in the agenda, it has the bleacher replacement. This study is going to be a little bit more broad-based than that because we'll take a look at not only Prevost Field and the bleachers, but how that affects other things that might need have some needs assessments and things that need to be done, like the track replacement and looking at the fields. And we're also going to look at Enke Field and other support buildings as part of this process. So tonight we'll talk about the goals and objectives, the process and the schedule, and the outcomes that we hope to achieve as part of this process. And beginning with the goals and objectives, simply put, the Radnor High School Athletic Facilities Master Planning process is just a vehicle for you to understand all the issues associated with your athletic fields for you to make informed decisions moving forward. And so that process and what the result of the study is going to come through, we're going to actually have a list of items that you're going to be able to choose from with costs associated with it, so with an understanding of how those options were developed and why. So that's what we hope to achieve with this process. So let's go through the process that we are going to embark on here shortly. Yesterday we established what we call the steering committee, and that steering committee is going to consider the information that we receive throughout the process, and it's just basically we're acting as a liaison group between all the key stakeholders and the school board. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're keeping in line with the goals and objectives that were established by the school board. So the steering committee is made up of district administration and Mr. Miller. Your name came up as a board representative, possibly as the chairperson for the facilities committee, that we would like to invite you to be part of this process.
Wasn't surprised. This
So that's why you see your name up here. You might not have known that. And then we would have the superintendent and all the administration there, as well as the principal of the high school and the athletic director. Myself as one of the design team people, and Hugh Cadzo, who's from ELA Sports, so they're the athletic design company that we have part of our team. The support that we have behind us also has consultants that kind of round out the rest of the design team. Schrader Group is not only an architectural firm, but we have structural engineering in-house. ELA Sport, like I said, is our athletic consultant. They're coupled with ELA Group, which is the site civil engineering component of their firm. Stadium Solutions is our bleacher consultant, and Snyder Hoffman is our mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer that we've done a lot of work with over the years. So part of this process, even though collectively our whole design team has hundreds of projects under our belt, similar to the type of project that you're looking at, not only regionally but across the state, we come with that wealth of experience, but we don't fully understand your district and how you like to operate. So along with the empirical data collection that we'll be doing, like getting topographic and boundary surveys, looking at your site plans, doing observations of your site, just evaluating the various components, we would like to involve not only your school but your community as part of the people, the end users, the key stakeholders, and involve them in community sessions to do workshops to understand what their wish lists, what their concerns are, what they would like to see happen as far as improvements associated with the various use groups. And then out of that, we'll come up with options and identify costs associated with each one of those line items And then it'll be interesting to see, too, as we go through this process, how one might be kind of tailored. Like if you do this, it's kind of prudent to do that because while you're ripping this apart, you're going to screw up with this, and you need to kind of think about it holistically and not just one item at a time. But you'll have a line item, kind of a line item veto list to look at in terms of cost to see how much you really want to look at that and how you want to phase it out. Is it a one-year project? Do you want to phase it out over multiple years? Those are the kinds of things that we'll consider as part of this study. So our firm is very involved in doing the community-based process. Like I said, it's a great avenue for us to really understand the districts that we work in. And as part of that workshop process, we like to involve not only school board members, but the district administration, the building administration, the public or community members, and it's great to have students associated with those projects too, because they're using it on a day-to-day basis, and we get a lot of good information from them. So this planning workshop, this is a workshop that we did in a school district in Chester County. Depending on the size of the group, we'll facilitate the workshop we'll have an initial presentation about what our goals and objectives are, and then we'll break up into groups, manageable groups like around 10 people, 8 to 10 people. Have a session where everybody starts to talk about, we'll have a key question that everybody starts to talk about, and then we bring it back to the whole group for discussion. We'll take that information and then go back to the steering committee to vet out some of the information that we heard. And so that's what we're going to talk about with the schedule here. You may have seen the schedule as part of our initial proposal. It's been modified slightly based on our conversation yesterday. So this week we're going to be going through a data collection process. Again, getting the site plans available by the school district, meeting with the athletic director on site to do some on-site observations, and preparing some site plans so that we can use that as part of the planning process. Yesterday we also we met. We established the workshop schedule. The facility committee is where we're meeting tonight, but looking at October 22nd, we'll again meet with the steering committee to prepare for the workshop that we are planning to schedule for 2 meetings in early November on November 5th, and the next week, these are both Mondays, on November 12th. And it'll be the same venue, but just give more people opportunities in case they can't make the first meeting, they can come to the second meeting and vice versa. Give them a couple of opportunities so that we can get feedback from those user groups. And then have a steering committee meeting again to review the workshop feedback later in, or early in December. That's as far as we got as far as planning for the 2018 school year. We'll probably come back in January and meet with you again to talk to you about what some of the planning options that we're considering. But that's, we want to just give you an idea where we're at right now with the planning. Okay. So the master plan outcomes that we're anticipating as part of this process is looking at the scope items and how we prioritize those scope items. And we're looking at Prevo field, as our either first phase or priority 1 phase, and identify items associated with that entity, and then looking at Enki field and other improvements with other support structures and fields in that area. The report will also talk about the budget and funding. Like I said, we'll do a list of the work with all the cost estimates associated with that. And then we're going to, with that, we'll have an understanding of how much funding we need to have and try to get identify what the funding sources are, whether it's out of your capital budget or whether it's other entities that can provide some funding through donations and that type of thing, or fundraising. And we'll also have a schedule pulled together. And one of the things that we'll talk about as we start to develop these options is how do we execute this, either from year to year or as a design bid build scenario. And I have or state contract. It could be a combination of both. There might be some state contract, whether it's replacement of the athletic fields or bleachers, or it could be a combination of both, where we do one scenario for a certain portion of the exercise, or we do both. And then the construction timing, depending on if and when the board gives us authorization to proceed with the design portion of it, depending on that time frame and that window is, we'll be able to determine when would the next opportunity be for construction. Typically, obviously, we'd like to get the construction done over the summer to minimize the impact to any of the activities that are going on during the school year, but also that is your premium time. Everybody's trying to get their work done in the summertime. So the best thing we can do is really try to plan for bidding it as early in the spring or late winter, meaning January, February, so that we can get first in the queue for any summer planning. The other option is to wait till after the football season and do some work, later on, but then we're subject to weather and, what are the cost implications and the timing impacts with that. So those are all things that we'll be considering as part of the planning process. Don't have all the answers yet, but just wanted to let you know how we think.
And I will open the, are you finished? Or? There you go.
Can we go back to the schedule page for 1 minute? Thank you very much for that. So if we're in December with the steering committee, that's it.
This is kind of just the whole information gathering and starting to think about options of what the options could be.
Right. So I guess what I'll just lay it out there. My biggest concern is that we know we have very specific needs. Certainly the most urgent of the needs are the bleachers, in my opinion. I am concerned that while we're looking at all this other stuff, and it's great and it's good, and I love holistic stuff in terms of looking at the whole thing and understanding the big picture, and while you've got the hood up, do we do something else, and getting the economy of those things. Okay. But those things also then slow project down. And I just will express my concern and leave it on the table. Again, the bleacher stuff is something I wanted to have done over a year ago. And we're really in a situation, if we go down this route and have such a big, broad look at this, that we are potentially yet another whole school year before we have the bleachers taken care of. And I personally think that needs to be done much faster than that. But I appreciate the approach. Please don't take it wrong. It's a reasonable, well-crafted approach. I just think we, the district, need to steer it a little bit more quickly in some areas.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew? Amy? Anyone? Thanks. No? Amy?
I was just curious how this is going to be framed for the community feedback. I imagine that you're going to do something like that, but in the spirit of managing expectations, is there a way that it's going to be framed for the community so what they suggest is based within the scope, potentially, of what this could be? Is it going to be, we're looking at structurally enhancing and improving the facilities that are already there, or we're entertaining all kinds of options for reimagining these facilities?
I'll take a shot at it, unless you want to start.
I'll jump in. I'll say that whenever we go forward with any type of project, we want to make sure that we're getting the proper feedback. In that feedback, though, you're right, you want to set up expectations, and it always concerns me when the word, wish list or wouldn't it be nice to do becomes part of the conversation. So I think at that feedback session, we need to explain that we want to understand what are the needs. We also want to understand what are some of the challenges with the facility. We want to frame it and share, much like we're sharing tonight, that we're going to look at different options, and then ultimately the board is going to have to decide administratively and as a board, we're going to have to decide which options we can move forward with. It is possible that a parent will come or a coach will come to that feedback and have this, pretty large suggestion of what we would like to see done, and that's the purpose of the steering committee and purpose of coming back and speaking to this group to talk about, okay, well, also what is realistic, what is out there. Is there been a large groundswell for this? And we're going to have discussions about, is this something that if we wanted to do, we would need fundraising to even entertain that aspect? That'll be all part of the discussion. So we're going to have to share with them that, there isn't a limitless pool of dollars to support this, that our budgets are tight every year. We want to make sure we're making the improvements necessary to our facility. At the same time, while we're lifting the hood, I think Patty's comment is very accurate. While we're lifting the hood, we want to make sure that we're looking at other things and not missing something, and make the conscious decision that we understand this is needed, but this is something we're not interested in, and I think that it has to be shared that the board may ultimately decide that that's a piece we may not be able to do now or may not even be interested in doing, and that's part of that discussion. Going back to Patty's comments too, I think part of this is also, as we develop this, as we go through this plan and the steering committee comes back here to this group, we're going to be able to look at the timeline a little closer depending on which avenues, as we're looking at different options, and we say, you know what, we are interested in doing B and C, or there is an interest in B and C. There's really only interest here in A, and this is what A looks like, could have an impact on the timing. But we need to make sure that we take the time to do this right, in the sense that I don't want us to rush something and then find out, ooh, we missed this piece, or we missed coordination of our track, or we missed, making sure that, one of the big components we've talked about we want to do is we want to make that whole area handicapped accessible. And so we don't want to miss that as we look at the handicapped accessibility of that entire area. Sorry, it was a really long answer. I apologize.
I have nothing to add.
You have anything else? Yep. No? Sylvie?
Just for my own curiosity, talking about like the community feedback workshops, you said you did one in Chester County. How did the community feedback workshops actually factor into the project?
In that particular case, it was a district-wide facility assessment that we were doing. We were analyzing all the buildings in the district. From K to 12, and they factored in hugely because it was a whole reorganization of grade levels that, from a community buy-in standpoint, was imperative, because that gives us kind of a step into the community to get community buy-in as part of that process, because that's a huge decision to be made. Closing schools, reconfiguring grade levels, how do kids move around the school district, where do the kids go? If parents and teachers are involved in that decision-making process, that helps get our information out into the community. So it was very instrumental.
Communication and posting some of this information so that we're as transparent and proactive about that as possible. Is there going to be a dedicated web page maybe to this project like we do with other initiatives?
Yes.
Just yes. That might be the first. That might be the first time you've just yesed it.
Suggesting I'm long-winded?
No, not at all. And another thing, is that anyone else? No. I for one am excited to start the process.
We're really looking forward to it. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. And moving right along to new business. I got an email, and then I actually noticed myself, and I don't know how I haven't noticed this because I drive by the building I don't know how many times a week, but it was brought to my attention the little ADA ramps, those reddish-orange mats with the bumps on it. Somebody paved over one with asphalt because they had to dig it up. I think the township dug up the one out here at the end. Then there was the plantings between South Wayne and the parking lot, somebody said were dead and have to be replaced. And then there was the question about the decorative concrete walkway. Well, they're asphalt. They're stamped asphalt, the decorative crosswalks that look like brick, but it's not. So I was just, somebody was asking me about that.
So the ADA that you were talking about, the little bumps, that actually we started replacing today. That'll probably be finished tomorrow. We chiseled that out and have that set in. You may notice when you leave tonight there's going to be 2 cones on your right side. That's where that was. As far as the plantings, we were talking about some of that prior when we had the water issues because it washed our mulch away, some of it. So we've been talking about that with maintenance, so we have to decide where we want to go there. And with the decorative walkways, there are some that are the paint is starting to wear off, so we should probably address that in spring or summer as well if we're going to paint one of those.
Do it now and then have to plow over it again. Yeah. So that's all I had.
So
And
I have
anyone?
two,
Oh.
just two. One, okay, And I'll bring up the request again. I know I've requested it at least at every one of our meetings in the past 3 months, or the 3 times I've been here, and that is the traffic around the high school and our parking garage, and where are we in the engagement of what's happening with that? Not because of any one property, but the implications of all of the changes. Have we engaged the township in discussions on traffic remediation in the area, and what their bigger game plan is?
So I have reached out, and actually I'm meeting with the township manager tomorrow to talk about that piece. Your request, the discussion we had here was, what is the engagement for not just King of Prussia Road, but that whole area?
Correct.
And what is it we would like to find out?
So back when the discussion of the zoning came up, the township had a number of discussions about what the implications would be on traffic lights and things like that. And I know part of the agreement with the one property was they were going to take care of some traffic light coordination in that corridor. But there were other discussions about lane widening at King of Prussia Road and Lancaster Avenue. We already have a lane issue on Radnor Chester Road with that left-hand turn onto Route 30 backs up already. You know, I won't talk about the craziness in the morning that happens around the school while people are trying to get kids to school on time and people are trying to get to work, and, you know, the speeds and other things that are happening in and around our property at those peak times of day. I appreciate there's going to be a traffic light as a part of the construction across the street from the high school on King of Prussia Road at the exit of our property, which I wholeheartedly applaud. Getting compliment to the one we have now at the end of Raider Road on the other side makes me really happy. But there are other things we need to be talking about with the township, and what are they planning to do with all this incremental traffic? When this building is done, it's at least what they reported for the one building was going to be at least 500 incremental cars on the road at our peak time in the morning in that area. What are we going to do about it? And what are they doing about it? There needs to be some coordinated. So maybe if they're going to come here and talk to us about the bridge, hey, why don't we have a topic of what the discussion is, how can we work together on the traffic situation?
So I was just going to say that great minds think alike. We have November. Steve Norsini's coming to speak, I believe, or will be present, because we're going to talk about the Radnor Trail. Peter Simone is planning on attending for the November facilities meeting to talk about the trail. We could certainly talk about the bridge, and we could certainly then talk about as well what is the township's plan, what are other steps at looking at that entire area, not just not the King of Prussia Road area, but beyond that.
Yeah, the whole area.
And I can discuss that and ask them to those questions, and what could they be prepared to discuss with us in November.
And on the trail part, I'm just going to, sorry, again, repetitive. I've asked that question before. Penn offered to put it on their side. It's been brought up by 2 public comments. That was, to some degree, a discussed deal. I know members on our board, not just me, thought that was part of the arrangement, and now it's not. I hear that there's some reason it can't be on that side. I'd like them to come and explain that reason in pure clarity. If it's a safety reason, I want to hear where's that coming from and why.
They did. I mean, I'm not...
Here?
Yeah, Peter Simone sat right there and explained to us why, and it was kind of our grants were, you know, they applied for the grants for where they want to put it on our property, and to put it over there, part of it was because of this whole grant thing, but the other thing was he wouldn't be able to get safety approval from PennDOT because you'd be sending people across King of Prussia at 30 and then back over at some point onto our property to connect it back, and PennDOT wouldn't approve.
Okay. But
instead of just staying on our, like, if you look at our property as an island.
But the connection.
So he was here and he explained it. It was
I heard him say it about the grant.
Was it a meeting of the whole, or?
No, I was here when he mentioned the grant.
But
it was.
He mentioned the grant.
Yeah, but it was.
But that discussion about how the trail goes, the trail connection actually is on the Penn side of the property. So they actually have to cross over King of Prussia Road. The way that they drew up the, yes, it is. Yes, it is.
No, they have a
The
sidewalk.
connection for the trail, the intended long-term connection for that trail was to, and I realize they're pieces right now, but the long-term vision that they presented
Well, you know,
was they
crosswalks
were
can-
going to connect it from the existing trail down that sidewalk, pick up in front of our property, go in front of our bus depot, and just about at the end of our bus depot, cross over to get onto the next connection, which is on the other side of the road. It's on the Penn side. So there isn't, I want to hear it. I want to see the safety discussion. I want to understand it. And
I mean,
have
he'll be
they
here.
actually
He'll be here. He can share that
requested,
again.
have they actually requested a modification to the grant, not just somebody assuming that they won't allow it, but given a change in the nature that Penn offered it on their side, has anybody actually explored with the grant committee whether they would refute the grant? I don't want to just make those assumptions.
Yeah, I think we
not-
can have that
it's
conversation
not right.
again, but I think that is what they shared
I
with
do
us, that
agree.
there
I
were.
agree with you. I
Yeah.
remember him talking
They
about the grant.
talked about that.
And part of
and-
it too is that, you know, where the, what's it called, the retaining bench, the retaining basin? where
Yes,
that
the
plane
retaining
crashed into
basin
the
was an
community.
was a problem
No
with
sidewalk
putting,
there.
putting it on the
stormwater
Penn property.
that other
Yeah.
side, so,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have stormwater, we have
Well,
wetlands, so I.
and I think
we
many
can talk
board
about
members
all
also,
Not a wet.
and I think many board members also had a realization in walking it, I mean, I think
Yeah.
board members and myself as well, that this could be a positive for our students at Radnor High School. This
it's
could
funny
be
you
an
say that. I
upgrade,
was-
because that's what the students who joined us talked about, and it was interesting, just today alone,
I was gonna
I
say
looked at
this.
our cross-country team and that, the use of that area. So there were some positives that started to come out about this and some realizations as well.
Right, but we
funny, I
get
was-
that positive, because it would still go across the front of our property on King of Prussia, I mean, on Lancaster Avenue, so you're still getting the piece that is not paved now, you still get that benefit. We have paving that goes up that the kids run on without any issue for the rest of that duration. So I get it, but I'm just gonna say it out loud. I feel like I feel like I was promised something, and then it was taken away, and there's not been, I'm not satisfied with that. I'm just simply not.
Well, I think we can talk about this more. I think you're accurate that there was some excitement when Penn offered to put it on their property. I think every one of us, all of us got excited that, oh, there's a possibility for that. We quickly realized through the walks in that presentation why that wasn't possible. But we could ask them to share that again with us next month on why that's not possible.
Any other new business? Anyone? Going once, going twice? Public comment? Hello, Doc.
Good evening. I just wanted to mention, while you're scheduling this big meeting with the township, you might also want to make sure that part of this community input for the planning for the athletic fields at the high school, since they are significant users of our fields. And I think that might be appropriate to make sure that they're included. I would also like to ask a couple of other questions about the planning for the look at the athletic fields at the high school, because I know how important athletics are to our community, as it is to many. First of all, I want to ask how the schedule on these types of community feedback groups might impact other kinds of planned input feedback sessions that may be on other issues in the township related to other district projects, because I think we can only expect people to come out so much for so many issues. And also, are there other ways to solicit feedback that might be more efficient and effective than having large group meetings? And I think while we want the community to buy into some of these big ticket items, we also need to temper it, as you said, with expectations. And I would hope that we would look, as we consider all of these issues, to really prioritize what it is that we need versus what it is that we want. Because I think we're at the point in our budgeting that we really need to think about what's needed versus what would be ideal. So thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Hello again.
Hello.
Hi. Is this on? Yes. Okay, cool. Once again, I'm Chris Henkel, and I'm here with my sister Lucy. We're students, and we're here in support of the bleacher improvements and in honor of our brother. And we would love to do like a meeting with the design team before they get started, and it would be really great if we get to participate early on and we think it's an important first step in the effort to make the fields really safe for everybody, spectators, visitors, and students. Like Ms. Booker said earlier, it's really important that we steer the design team in the right direction. Personally, we're kind of into focusing on accessibility and safety more for people like Peter. So, thank you.